sure we both would cherish all throughout our lives, as there is a very strong belief that states, once an educator, always an educator. I strongly believe in this principle because engaging oneself in teaching, molding a kid's life to make him think and act independently is a noble job. To be constantly engaged in forging a kid's emotional, academic, artistic intelligence is a pledge we all take and work upon constantly. It is with deep regret and concern when I saw this honourable member leave the House, excuse himself from the House, to condemn someone based on allegations, an allegation that has not been proved yet. Is it not unfair to judge, condemn, and punish someone on unfounded grounds? Mr. Teacher, sir, if we would have all, as teachers, indulge in such doings, then no teacher or no student would have ever stayed in a class. Mr. Speaker, sir, another thing that I would also take up in the education system is the education system at the Mahatma Gandhi Institute. We are all constantly driven by the Gandhian principle and try to inculcate his values in our teachings and learnings. Am I not right, sir? Unfortunately, he's not here. The basic principle of Gandhi is that of ahimsa, meaning non-violence. The verbal violence displayed yesterday by this honourable member, even going to the extent of not respecting a deceased politician who has been the Prime Minister and President of the Republic, without hesitation and shame, is astounding. The deceased gentleman cannot even defend or lay any defense from his side. Is it not hitting below the belt, sir? Through my experience as a teacher, I opted to teach constructive criticisms, to differentiate between facts and figures and gossips. That is, to check your facts right. Not to hit below the belt or indulge in a tit-for-tat game, that is, an eye for an eye will make the world go blind, as Gandhiji so rightly said. To give the full context and to give the full raw information instead of selecting information or decontextualizing them for personal gains, even if it amounts to political gains. To discuss ideas and not people's personal acts or choice. I leave the rest to your enlightened conscience. I just hope that students will not fear the hypocrisy of politics that some politicians practice and use as tools to devaluate, denigrate, and humiliate. I will end this part on the quote of Ralph Waldo Emerson, who so rightly said, "People are very inclined to set moral standards for others." Let me now come, Mr. Speaker, sir, to the budget. What should be retained from this budget is when we choose to do a budget, it's all about making choices, making and setting up priorities. The government chose to invest in people. It chose to put the population as its core and prime focus. For this, I commend the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance. We have never foregone our pledge and objective following our election. That is, to stand by and with the population. Times of crisis are very difficult to live, but it helps to unveil the truth, the dedication and the perseverance. It shows that our mission has remained unflinched and our vision to bring along modernity and a full dose of creativity in doing things remain as the foundation of our actions and thoughts. My speech today is a simple and short one, addressed directly to Mauritian families, to the working class, the youth, and those seeking to be proactive within a dynamic and a competitive setup. Mr. Speaker, sir, what should be retained from the content of this budget entitled "With the People, for the People"? What are the measures taken to ensure the realization of the vision of this government in the short, medium, and long term? And what does this budget offer on a microeconomic and on a macroeconomic level? And what are the incentives in this budget to encourage young people to believe in the future of this country? With the people, for the people. Though those are not just some vain words. This government has proven that with every step taken and every proposed policy measure, the priority is to first and foremost ensure the future of the country and to put the welfare of the Mauritian people at the core of this budget. Let us start by noting that a particular attention has been given to motivate our young people and to facilitate their participation as major actors in economic activities. This government has come up with exceptional measures to ensure that our young population, and in particular the graduates, the skilled, and those with a vision and wishing to be their own boss, have all the support they would need to create their startups from scratch. This is a budget that emphasizes on innovation and entrepreneurship, while giving the opportunity to young people and all those who wish to take risks and innovate to participate economically in food security program by helping them invest in the agro-industry sector. It is true that the same budget states that the government will offer 8,353 jobs in the public sector to absorb skilled and unskilled workers, graduates and postgraduates. At the same time, this budget enables the younger generation to think about entrepreneurship, becoming their own boss and using their knowledge, skills, and attitude to sail in the world of innovation, creativity, and using new technologies to invest in our core sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, construction, ICT, events and arts management, creative and entertainment industry, and the financial sector. Mr. Speaker, sir, in line with this, let me highlight some of the measures taken in this budget regarding small and medium agro-industrial entrepreneurship. For too long, the agricultural and farming sector has unfortunately been relegated to the rank of a non-glamorous industry, unworthy of being undertaken by the highly educated or academically qualified workforce. This budget provides incentives to each and everyone to explore the agricultural industries and fisheries sector. Let me go directly on how can someone practically undertake this challenge. A university graduate, be it from the law and management faculty, the science faculty, the economics and accounting departments, the arts faculty, and the engineering and agricultural faculty, can make a cluster of professionals. They will easily be able to register a company or a cooperative, all of which have been made easier by the various ease of doing business incentives in the budget. They shall obtain the appropriate support and mentoring from institutions like the EDB, SME Mauritius, FARE, Mauritius Research and Innovation Institute, Ministry of Agriculture or Fisheries, the National Cooperative College, the Ministry of Industrial Development, SMEs and Cooperatives. Landscope Mauritius and Rosebel Sugar State are institutions accredited for agricultural land lease, and financial institutions such as the DBM offer funding, grant subsidies, and other financial incentives. Budget propositions such as the increase in grants to boost local production through subsidies on fruit and vegetable, livestock, apiculture, fertilizers, and composting materials will reduce the financial burden on startups, given the price hikes on imported inputs. The budgeted sum of 3 billion rupees mobilized for farmers, planters, breeders, and fishers are examples of some of the interesting initiatives to bolster our primary sector output, and the food processing parks will generate added value to the local industry. As stated in the paragraph 52 of the budget, the government, through the Development Bank of Mauritius, will be investigating in 2 food security clusters at the cost of 200 million each, namely an agro-processing park at Oyita and food processing cluster at Rampart, are very interesting incentive to the startups. An income tax holiday of 8 years for planters engaged in innovation and sustainable agricultural practice is without a doubt an encouraging measure that will attract the younger generation and lead to the professionalization of this sector. Self-sufficiency in food can only be attained by the modernization and transformation of the agricultural sector, and by attracting young and skilled talents. This budget provides the perfect gateway to attaining this objective. The same applies for the livestock breeding sector. The livestock industry has an important role, our food security strategy, regarding the local meat and dairy production sector. The increase on subsidy on animal feed, investment in livestock zones, extension of the cattle breeding scheme to importers of cattle, grants to purchase cows aged less than 1 year, subsidies on the purchase of equipment, goat farming scheme for cooperatives are real-time measures for increasing interest, exploration, trial, and implementation among the young workforce. Who does not want to probe and explore a world full of potential, possibilities, and challenge if you are a young, dynamic, and active individual? I will now add a personal touch to this dynamic thinking. Apiculture has been given a special focus in this budget when elaborating on the different incentives in the agricultural sector. For that, I commend both the Minister of Agro-Industry and the Minister of Finance on this important fact. Mauritius is the appropriate place to develop a full-fledged apiculture industry, not only for the local market, but also to emerge on the international market. We have the appropriate climate, the appropriate grounds, and the right setup to promote apiculture among Mauritians. Beekeeper can either operate on a very small scale or a large scale and still be able to derive profits from their investment. The 1980s AYC's Agricultural Youth Club have helped in creating many apiculture entrepreneurs. Measures such as a subsidy of 500 rupees per bee queen, beeswax at an affordable price, and new mellifluous plants can be considered as a form of appropriate technical support to beekeepers, whilst a one-off grant of 150 rupees per beekeeper and the scheme for acquisition of CCTV cameras to secure their breeding grounds are well-thought measures. I am sure the Ministry of Agriculture, along with FARE, will accompany individuals through youth clubs, cooperatives, to succeed in the field. As we talk about the transformation of the sector through mechanization, innovation, and sustainability, I have to point out the micro-propagation and seed production scheme which are being introduced. There is no food production without seed cultivation. This scheme will benefit both existing and new planters to create a home nursery. The 500,000 rupees earmarked for seed sustainability is a commendable one. Incentives on fertilizers, biofertilizers, and composts are also important component in sustaining crop cultivation and initial investment and motivation to engage in agricultural fields. It has been found that almost all startups registered within the sector also opt to be part of a cooperative. The budget promotes the formation and the sustainability of cooperatives by giving various incentives. Mr. Speaker, sir, I have to include the blue economy and fishery measures in my speech, both as a marine biologist and as someone who believes that the blue economy provides loads of opportunities and potential. For a country which has an exclusive economic zone of 1,284,997 square kilometers, it is of concern that 2/3 of our country's fish and seafood consumption are of imported origin. We have the potential to drastically reduce our reliance on imports. For this to happen, we need to review our blue economic model in order to optimize on our resources and to provide mentoring, support, and initiatives to further capitalize on this vast and underutilized potential. I will here again point out on the need of clustering university freshers, graduates or trainees, technically trained workforce from the MITD, and fishers and inhabitants of the coastal region within cooperatives, with the aim of exploring, investing, and emerging as economic players in this field. For this to happen, we shall need a full-fledged mentoring program with the EDB, the Ministry of Agro-Industry and Blue Economy, the Maritime Trainee Academy, the private partners, as well as international expertise. And here I'm thinking of countries such as Norway or Japan, who have a worldwide reputation in this field. Those startups to which I'm referring will need our continuous monitoring and support, right from the conception of their business plan. However, I shall make an appeal to the young generations to probe the possibilities and to engage themselves in this measured, risk-taking endeavor. This budget provides the following well-devised incentives. I shall refer to paragraph 83, where the ministry intends to make 6 barachois available for the production of crabs. 4 sites have also been allocated for off-lagoon aquaculture. Paragraph 84 also mentions that a new concession framework will be introduced in the maritime zones to allow for in-lagoon pearl, oyster, and algae culture. The additional hatchery at Albion Fisheries and Research Center to increase the production of fingerlings will also be beneficial to the startups. Stock assessment on the Saya de Malabang to identify small pelagic species for local consumption will also help increase the market potential to have a greater return on investment. And above all, I welcome the grant given by the government for the acquisition of semi-industrial fishing vessels by registered cooperatives to a threshold of 6 million rupees, and the rest will be financed through loans by MoBank. Mr. Speaker, sir, among the various measures in the budget to encourage the dynamic young talents to think outside the box, I will also like to state the opportunities that startups may look for in the construction sector. Paragraph 107 states that public contracts below 20 million rupees for small contractors. This could encourage young civil, structural, and electrical engineers, quantity surveyors, skilled and qualified electricians and plumbers to collaborate and undertake such projects as construction entrepreneurs. Talking about arts and culture as an industry, I commend the Artist Incubator Scheme to nurture and develop new talents. The National Arts Center, the Centre de Formation Artistique, the Mauritius Arts Expo, and other similar platforms are important launches that will help create and promote the arts and culture industry. Mr. Speaker, sir, before concluding, I would like to offer my gratitude to the Minister of Finance for my constituency number 11. Un portefeuille de 501 millions de roupies pour construire les drains, des milliards de roupies pour le coastal refurbishment entre Rivière des Créoles et Deux Frères sont 2 mesures que je ne puisse mentionner dans mon discours de budget. With the advent of climate change and sea level rise, our coast, our southeast coast, is being impacted by beach erosion, leading to shoreline degradation and putting amenities at risk. And the Ministry of Environment, Solid Waste Management and Climate Change has really done a very good consultancy project and came up with a full-fledged coastal protection rehabilitation program since 2019. Presently, the coastal protection works are over a total length of approximately 5.4 kilometers, and it extends from Pointe-aux-Feuilles to Grand Sable, Petit Sable to Bambou-Vieilleux, Bambou-Vieilleux to Anse-Jonché, Providence to Vieux-Grand-Port, Bois des Amourettes, and works progress is now expected to be completed by the third quarter of 2022. Here, I would also stress on the consideration that the Minister of Finance, as well as the Minister of Environment, gave to our request for a waterfront project at Deux Frères. It is now a reality. The consultancy service for this project is ongoing for design of works. Implementation of works on site is expected to start in January 2023. And this budget allocates the necessary funds. Following the MV Wakasho oil spill, Rivière des Créoles and Vieux-Grand-Port were mostly affected, and accordingly, these sites have also been earmarked for coastal protection, landscaping, and rehabilitation work. The tender for recruitment of a consultant for these sites have already been floated. So I had to lay down officially my gratitude to the Minister of Finance to be à l'écoute des mandants de la circonscription et en même temps remercier le Premier ministre qui a toujours eu une écoute spéciale, une écoute affectionate, as we term it, for the constituency. Merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Conclure. Mr. Speaker, sir, I shall conclude on this note. This budget is one that offers a whole lot of opportunities, mainly to the younger people and to those persons who believe innovation and risk-taking. The government has laid out the groundwork for the creation of those opportunities. The budget reflects the realities. We speak the truth and we believe in the truth. We are not building sandcastles, but we are laying the foundation of a future based on opportunities and are building on our strengths by investing in people and forging a unified force where each and every citizen becomes a partner in sharing and caring. This budget has rightly identified the policy change that Mauritians should engage in the coming years. Measures for reducing our carbon footprint, creating the right ecosystem to achieve greater food security independence, transitioning towards a greener economy with a deeper utilization of renewable energy will not only ignite growth opportunities for Mauritius, but also structurally repair the state of our public accounts. This government is also resolved to equip the country with the right regulatory policy regime to protect the most precarious segment of the population, but also encourage job creation, confirming mild or lower taxation at large. It demonstrates that this government is yet again favoring labor-driven activities instead of pure tax-subsidized, capital-intensive driven programs. I end my speech by again reiterating my belief that walking hand in hand with the population will favor personal, economic, and social growth. Together, we will climb through difficulties. These are what defines this budget for the people, with the people. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, this budget is a lost opportunity. And I will start by asking the very basic question. Where is resilience, recovery, and sustainability to build back better? Our friends will say that government is government and government so decides. And it has decided in favor of the corporate sector. It has decided to exempt corporate sector from its massive land tax obligation. It has decided to turn its back on people who think everything is allowed and everything goes. I'm sure the Honorable Minister of Education has taken cognizance of what has recently happened at the MES in relation to paper being leaked. I think this is a very serious matter, and I would have expected a statement to be made by the Honorable Minister of Education, because we are talking of so many families who are concerned, and of course, that has created not only a climate of uncertainty, but there's no trust in an institution which conducts exams. And what is being done, Mr. Speaker, as I said, to reassure parents, teachers, and students? One suspension does not solve the problem. It's the very foundation of education that has been shaken and stirred. And I expect government to come and react and take appropriate measure. So when there's erosion of confidence, how can we build a nation, Mr. Speaker, and help recovery and give resilience and sustainability to build back better? Mr. Speaker, the regime is a mere tenet and living on borrowed time, and if fundamentals are not addressed, government will continue to allow the rupee to depreciate for tax buoyancy and growth, except that it is not real growth and will lead to descent into social chaos. Under the MSM government, the economy is like a cockpit of a crashing airliner where the dashboard lights are all flashing red. It is precisely because it is heading for a crash that the minister announced a breaking news yesterday on radio. Government has decided to partially privatize Metro Express Limited. Now, if this is management of economy by the best Minister of Finance of Africa, then there is deep-seated concern. One may say it's economy stupid. Mr. Speaker, the budget is not with the people and for the people. Putting an inflated price before people is not shared prosperity. It is shared poverty. 40% of the poorest section of the population is being let down. The climate of uncertainty and unpredictability also contributes to the high prevalence of anxiety and depression in the population. I grant you, Mr. Speaker, our situation is a far cry from Sri Lanka, which has a huge external debt, and unlike Pakistan, which has an import cover of 2 months. In Sri Lanka, civil servants are given a day off to plow the land in an effort to produce more of what we eat and to eat what we produce, to reduce the import bill. In Pakistan, people are urged to drink fewer cups of tea to keep the country's economy afloat. It's an important bill for them, and is as high as $600 million US for tea. As a net food, feed, fuel, and fertilizer importing country. If there is no sound economic management of external debt, of public debt, external debts will escalate and will impact upon our investment grade. External stability is threatened by worsening trade and current account imbalances. Consequently, the rupee is being weakened and foreign exchange reserves are being depleted. And it will accentuate with the rise in the interest rate of the US dollar. Mr. Speaker, sir, we must never lose sight that we are one notch above junk. As we say, although it's a long, long way to Tipperary, but we are not too far for either. We are not too far either from the Sri Lankan pogrom. Mr. Speaker, these budget proposals come from the weakest government that this country has known since independence. You want me to say it again? These budget proposals come from the weakest government that this country has known since independence. It's a web of bluff. Economists have rung the alarm bell and remind the regime that we are living on borrowed time, borrowed money, as if there's no tomorrow. And we're inching closer to the brink of an economic collapse. Mr. Finance, either you reverse policy, or you maintain the trend, and if we know what the consequences would be on the weak, the poor, and the restless, Mr. Speaker. Because at the end of the day, people need money to buy basic commodities. We are putting great expectation on tourist arrival. Unfortunately, the tourism rage travel might be affected given the slowdown in our main markets coupled with rising interest rate. The rise of the interest rate in the US will impact on our balance of permanent currency, and rupee is on the constant decline. So, Speaker, this is the time when we would have expected government to switch gear and move towards a more focused and structured investment program. But year in, year out, public sector investment program is on the downtrend in relation to massive shortfall. And this is what happened year in, year out. The root causes of delayed project is due to arbitrary and selective choice of contractors. Yesterday, I was quite surprised in relation to the question put by the leader of the opposition to the minister responsible for national infrastructure, who was unwilling to disclose basic information to the community in relation to an acquisition of land. Access to information regarding flood-prone areas on natural drainage path is a right. I still can't understand why the reply was not forthcoming and why the minister concerned felt that the information is sensitive and he was indifferent to the appeal made by the leader of the opposition. Why? Who are the special beneficiaries of this privileged information? Information is knowledge and power. Unless the information is disclosed to the cronies to speculate of land, but you know, when there is opacity and non-transparency is a guaranteed downfall. And the focus of the budget is on land speculation. the right of those who have residence permits to acquire property subject to contribution of 10% to solidarity levy. Mr. Speaker, at a later stage, I will come to the Festival de la Terre. Why, at a time when poverty is rampant, why have they eliminated the 4.8 billion subsidies on basic commodities? It's inappropriate, and I still can't understand. I hope the minister has not cowed down to big importer traders who have threatened to disrupt the supply. À qui profite le crime? It's a lèse-majesté, and the outcome is to make the poor poorer. And there's a big price to pay for misleading the information. I have here an interview given by the president of the Association pour la protection de l'environnement et des consommateurs, who stated very clearly l'allocation de 1000 roupies sur les salaires partira en fumée. Indeed, the 1,000 rupees dispensed as financial support has already been sucked into the vortex of inflation, which is a tax without legislation, first and foremost on the poor, the weak, the vulnerable, the widows, the orphans, the unemployed, and the middle class. Mr. Speaker, the inflation is a spit-fired dragon that has to be slain. It is not because almost 70% of our inflation is imported that it would be difficult to mitigate. But the Bank of Mauritius cannot be the errand boy of the Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, we've said right from the outset that the cure is worse than the disease. And I was shocked to hear from several members on the government bench that the raid on the Bank of Mauritius was justified, irrespective of the internal reserves of the bank run dry. This government is a proponent of high fiscal deficit. And the more financing from the Bank of Mauritius will plunge the economy deeper into an inflationary spiral. It's like pouring fuel to a roaring fire. Mr. Speaker, not a single week goes by that the rupee is not depreciated. Inflation is 12%, and food inflation of 18% is a tax, as I've stated, without legislation, which is the poor, the vulnerable, and the middle class harder. Poverty and costs of living and crisis is a living reality. There are people eating not more than a meal a day, and it has become a treat for many. Mr. Speaker, since 2015, the policy has been one of depreciation of the rupee. They never prepare for the worst and hope for the best. They forget that there's no free lunch. They have put sound economic management on the back burner. In the face of world crisis, the minister opted for the easy option. This is the reason why the regime raided the bank, not of a one-off of 60 billion rupees, but a total amount of 158 billion, which is indeed a super bonanza for the raiders. The raid, Mr. Speaker, sir, has not stopped for the financial year 2021-2022. An additional of 25 billion was transferred from the Bank of Mauritius to the account of government via the MIC. The regime snubbed the recommendations of the IMF, which stressed in the name of governance the Bank of Mauritius should stop financing fiscal expenditure. The Minister of Finance, the Minister of Financial Services earlier explained the relevance and importance of being delisted, of course, from the EU blacklist and the Financial Action Task Force. And there are lessons to be drawn from this. That's why the Bank of Mauritius cannot be the errand boy of the Ministry of Finance. And the demarcation line between fiscal and monetary policy has to be cleared. We must not be indifferent and insensitive to World Bank and IMF and Moody's credit ratings, as were under the constant watch. The role of the Bank of Mauritius is to stabilize the currency and make it available without delays or queuing. As of now, there's a tacit measure of foreign exchange control by the Bank of Mauritius. Mr. Speaker, the vault of the bank has been raided, and it's not members of the opposition who are saying it. That was clearly spelled out by former governor of the central bank, Mr. Bassantroy. And you are not going to say that he's a demagogue or anti-patriot. His concern is inflation, the precursor to cost of living crisis. Mr. Speaker, where the stabilization account of the State Trading Corporation, ripped apart by the Minister of Finance as part of the rip-off policy of the regime. I agree, part of the profits of state-owned enterprises should be credited to the consolidated fund, but not at the expense of the stabilization account or pension scheme. And I see no reason why the price of petroleum products couldn't have come down by at least 3 rupees. The charges for the construction of a storage tank and the cost of vaccine in the price structure no longer arise. The price of fuel is a triggering variable in the economy of Mauritius. The price of many mass-consumed products is indexed to the price of fuel, and reducing the latter would have caused a snowball effect on related products, liberating additional income for the household and business, thus mitigating the loss of purchasing power due to inflation. Mr. Speaker, coupled with the 1,000 rupees income support, this would have brought some fresh air to the suffocating population. Let me tell inflation-loving regime, patience of the population is wearing thin. In April of this year, it was announced that CB finances are on the red, and one can expect an increase in tariff of up to 12%, if not more. Besides increase in tariff, I hope the CB Staff Association realizes that the pension of its staff is at risk. Mr. Speaker, those at the helm, after squandering 18 billion rupees on BI and the 6 billion rupees on Betamax, and raiding the Bank of Mauritius of 158 billion rupees, cannot get away with murder. The next vault is the contribution sociale généralisée. After the raid on the central bank, its pension scheme for workers, which is under siege, and the fiscal deficit of the contribution sociale généralisée, which is a tax, means that those who are 40 years old, 45 years old today, will find it hard to have their full entitlement on retirement. Mr. Speaker, under the Labour government never raided the Bank of Mauritius, never cream off the profits of state-owned enterprises, or tamper with National Savings Fund or National Pension Fund in the face of crisis. Crisis was never a justifiable reason, be it during the oil and energy crisis of 79-82 and the global financial crisis of 2007 and 2008. Even under force majeure, clear policies and guidelines have to be established by central bank. Reserve Bank of India was a pacemaker during the pandemic, an example which Bank of Mauritius could have emulated. A one-off is a one-off. Even then, it is a loan and not a grant. That's why IMF has impressed upon government for unutilized MIC money to be returned to the central bank. Ask yourself one simple question. Why will the regime of Pravin Jagnnath not return the unutilized MIC fund to the Bank of Mauritius? It's a war chest for their bonanza. Of course, the minister will say it's the business of the Bank of Mauritius. It is big business indeed. The Mauritius Investment Corporation, a company wholly owned by the Bank of Mauritius, has recently been involved in a property deal worth over 4,500 million rupees. Just for comparison's sake, the famous Ilovo deal was a mere 1,600,000,000 rupees. MIC is the be-all and the end-all of the Festival de la Terre, bailout of toxic companies, and quasi-participation in entities like hotels, airport of Mauritius at exorbitant prices. It acquired 427 acres of Omnican land at overvalued price of 10,500,000 an acre, and acquired land from Medine Sugar Estate near pig farming at La Chaumière at more than 4.2 million per acre, Mr. Speaker. So we are talking of 144 acres for 620 million rupees. The land has poor drainage and wastewater accumulates. Amazing that Mauritius Investment Corporation was not diligent to find out about the suitability of the land. Where are the findings of DOMA report on flood-prone areas? Mr. Speaker, who will bail out the distressed small plot owners of sugarcane mired in debt? MIC reserved for the privileged members who will line up the pockets and the war chests of our friends on the other side. The TUC, Mr. Speaker, sir, the upper class exclusive club, this is what MIC is all about. Yes, we know that small planters are desperate to be fairly remunerated on the sale of a ton of sugar. On the other hand, the corporate is exempted from tax payment on land transaction. But who will exempt the small landowners? Never has there been such a scandalous transaction, sold 5 times the actual market price. Why has the chief government valuer kept at arm's length? In the past, when the Bank of Mauritius had compulsorily acquired property in its vicinity, the valuation was conducted by the then chief government valuer, and on the one occasion, there was a departure from the then governor of the bank, late Mr. Ramphal. He had to convey an apology, and corrective measure was taken. Where is accountability and transparency? At a time when the public coffers are empty and government is desperately scrambling to lay its hand on funds to meet its commitments, the public has a right to know and to put the right question on the mega deal. Why did MIC spend such a colossal sum in buying properties for which the MIC is clueless as to what to do with the land? How are the prices determined? Does it represent the real market value of the land? Did MIC seek the advice of a competent, experienced valuer or that of the government valuation department on the true value of the land before embarking on such a massive acquisition? If the answer is yes, can the experts' report be made public? Or did MIC merely rely on the price asked by Medine Limited and Omnican, no doubt based on the sugar state's expert opinion? Mr. Speaker, a cursory look at the Omnican sale indicates that the prices paid by MIC are grossly inflated. Some years back, you know very well that the SIFB Sugar Insurance Fund Board bought land at Trianon for 110 million rupees. And following a public outcry, a fact-finding committee under Judge Ojaib concluded that SIFB paid an inflated price for the land. Several officials had to resign, and charges of corruption were laid against them. Mr. Speaker, the sum involved in the Sugar Insurance Fund Board is indeed peanuts compared to that of the MIC. Finally, whenever a person sells land, he has to pay land transfer tax at 5% of the price. On the price of 4,500 million, the tax due to government by Medin and Omnicane is 225 million rupees, and both Medin and Omnicane Limited were exempted from payment of the tax, Mr. Speaker, and did not pay a cent as tax. Mr. Speaker, the public has a right to know whether they have been exempted. Why the public has a right to know why they have been exempted when this tax spares nobody. Whether you sell land to settle a debt, or meet medical expenses, or for the education of your children, the tax is inescapable. In addition, an unlucky 20,000 of sellers are subsequently claim additional tax and penalty for the so-called under-declaration value by the Registrar General. The Minister of Finance has an obligation to enlighten the public. And in view of the colossal sum of public funds involved, light should be shed in the name of transparency and accountability. This scandal of a big proportion called for a commission of inquiry. Mr. Speaker, tax is a tax, and the corporate has to pay its taxes. They always take and always find excuses to avoid paying taxes, or if they pay, it's minimum taxes that are being paid. Mr. Speaker, a weak government continuously plagued by scandals, each one more damning than the previous one. Government is politically obscene, a flagship of fraud and corruption. And it doesn't give a damn about negative outlook as long as the loot is shared. The broker who obtained 26 million rupees for 18 days of work is loitering in the corridor waiting to be appointed as transaction manager for the sale of 22 billion rupees worth of asset. Time will tell if the 22 billion rupees proposed equity sale to reduce public debt will ease off the nearly 100% of GDP as of June 2023. Unless there's wide discussion at the bar of public opinion, they have no right to dispose of the heirloom of the nation. Who will be the broker? Your guess is as good as gold. It's good to recall the appointment as independent commissioner on the Brigham Commission of Inquiry, while Mr. H.A. was at the same time providing services against fees in favor of NIC and the National Property Fund Limited, and also negotiated his payment of 26 million rupees for 18 days of work, which was previously refused prior to 2017. After 2017, for reasons which was obvious, the world became his oyster. Now you understand who is the preferred broker of the regime. They call it, let's share the loot. For the 22 billion revenue, they will put up anything and everything for sale. The broker will have a field day with the sale of the century. And what's up for sale? NIC, Port Services, Mauritius Telecom, perhaps Secom, and the National Property Fund Limited. Bank, have been told, will be a giveaway in any shady deal because it's worth almost nothing. But then who will buy? The first to run, to offer, and to meet the requests of government would be, of course, MIC. And the Bank of Mauritius with its printing machine, MIC, Mr. Speaker. So this is the integrity and democratization in the parlance of the MSN. And the Prime Minister will chair the committee to fast-track the submission of projects. Mr. Speaker, if you pass by the door of the committee room, when meeting is on, lower your mask, take a deep breath, you'd feel the whiff of money, sir. As Machiavelli said, he who controls the fears controls the soul. But the regime had the dose of its bitter pill from Canlevier to Plaine Magnan. Beware of the silent majority. They are from the main street, the side street, the back street, and cul-de-sac or dead end. That's their dead end. And the Iran boys and girls of Pravin Jagannath MSM should know, when the tide recedes, the naked truth will be revealed. There is no escape. Mr. Speaker, every government which keeps oppressing our population with unnecessarily harsh police practices and unduly severe penalties, it is continuously raiding the population through COVID-19 prevention and sanitary measures regulations 2021. Appendix A of the budget speech shows that the raised revenue from fines, penalty, and forfeits was 100 million more than 2021-2022 budgetary estimates and is expected to increase by 5% in the fiscal year 2022-2023. Mr. Speaker, a government whose politics is one of basic instincts, verging on hate and hell-bent to strike with vengeance. The rise of the cronies and blatant statements made by ministers with underlying communal overtones highlight the frailty of a regime. Ethnic democracy and autocracy gives a false sense of hope, an illusion of power. The power belongs to the people, and the people will stand united against mafia politics, money politics, fake news, and manipulation of public opinion. Obey and comply is the dominant philosophy of regime. Sadly, government backbenchers have to bend backwards to pay lip service to the leader of the House. Where is the freedom to express without fear or prejudice? Recent Freedom in the World reports noted declining trend in the index of political rights and civil rights since 2014. The shouting brigade of the MSM, if it has an iota of conscience and justice, should stand with the people, for the people, and not allow the corporate to have a field day. Those who are not lackeys, they should join us to wage war on fraud and corruption and to empower the poor. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the highlights of cabinet decision since the scandalous public disclosure of the horrible torture video, the Council of Ministers has remained totally silent on the unacceptable, inhuman treatment inflicted on a number of our citizens. And I will comment on this at a later stage. On page 54 of the budget speech, the minister has claimed that he's providing 10.9 billion in the police force in upholding law and order for one and all. In any civilized country, in the wake of the disclosure of scandalous torture video showing inhuman and degrading treatment being inflicted on individuals, the allocation of the budget of the police force would also have contained provisions to ensure the proper policing of police officers, because law and order is a matter for the people and the authorities. Yet, at paragraph 309, 323, the budget speech dealing with law and order, the minister has provided no budget whatsoever for the policing of officers or for the protection of suspects from inhuman and degrading treatment and from torture. This omission gives the impression that the Minister of Finance and the minority and weak government to which he belongs has no interest in preventing breaches and violation of human rights. Mr. Speaker, what have we seen instead? We have seen a commissioner of police who is reported to have said as follows at the end of last month: on Top FM, vos catégoriques là, aussitôt qui nous gagne tout ban preuve, nous pouvons faire une enquête et vous promettre qui ban coupable pour faire face à ban sanction qui me pensé nous pensons nous pouvons un signal très fort que les autres n'ont pas pu emboîter le pas. At the end of May 2022, therefore, while the minister was carrying out his pre-budgetary consultation, the Commissioner of Police did not apparently know that the horrifying torture video had already been remitted to his predecessors 2 years ago. And he realized under the budgetary measure that government has lamentably failed to take. Indeed, until last year, a code of ethics prepared by Transparency Mauritius for policemen used to be remitted to every police officer upon his being sworn in, but the government has stopped this practice. They did not think that police officers should have a copy of that code of ethics, or maybe they did not even think that police officers need a code of ethics. What could you expect of a government which has itself demonstrated on several occasions that it has no ethos? Therefore, I invite the Minister to make budgetary provisions for the reinstatement of Code of Ethics prepared by Transparency International, which explain to police officers in detail the behavior and attitude which they should have towards the public, and also for reprinting the police instructions book, a practice and procedure manual which was so useful to police officers in all the days. Indeed, time to bring in the Police and Criminal Evidence Bill, Mr. Speaker. In the same radio broadcast on Top FM, the Commissioner of Police is reported to have stated as follows. Et maintenant, on peut aussi dire, ban dimoun qui tient là en possession sa vidéo là. Vous êtes aussi plus coupable même que ça ban soi-disant policier qui fin faire ça là. Qui fait, vous n'êtes pas fin dénoncer à l'époque. Police Inspector Shivakuten, the spokesperson at the police press office, had been remitted a pen drive of the torture videos since 2 years back. Kisana Kipli Kupab. The other officer who's in the know is CCID Jangi. Should the budget provisions 2022-2023 not make provisions for efficient working CCTV camera everywhere in the police station? Mr. Speaker, who has left the Tazers, an illegal weapon at the station? Who had access to them? Members of the squad had never denied that this prohibited weapon was not used as an instrument of torture and poke at the genital and perineal areas of the victims. Notwithstanding physical and psychological torture, the person, of course, will be wrecked. How is it that the Prime Minister was kept in the dark? The CP, who is the holder of a constitutional post, meets the Prime Minister every day. Then, if this is so, heads have to roll. I have known many CPs, and they are too diligent and far from being flic en délire not to share this matter of grave concern with the Prime Minister. I've worked closely with one Prime Minister and several acting Prime Ministers. It's too serious to accept at face value that there had been dereliction of duties. Why is the IPCC waiting? Why is it waiting to call the spokesperson and the head of the CCID? The Independent Police Criminal Commission is and remains a toothless bulldog, and the Act has to be revisited to ensure its independence. Mr. Speaker, U.S. Secretary of State Mrs. Clinton, at the AGWA meeting in Nairobi in 2009, hailed Mauritius as a model of democracy, rule of law. All those who fub the chest to think the glory of Prime Minister Pravin Jagnnath, what is it that you are going to say to the victims and their kin? Our security and safety has been compromised. Our reputation as a safe destination has taken a huge setback. The wreck of Wakasho was not only an ecological disaster, but has shown our vulnerability and exposure from attacks, and I hope not terrorism attack from the sea. Our seabed is a thorn for drug trafficking. Prime Minister cannot always plead ignorance on safety and security. He cannot react tardily, Mr. Speaker. Now, quite obviously, there...
You have more? How many minutes more you will take?
I have 30 minutes more.
30?
How many? 21.
Would you like we break and...
Okay, we'll break. Okay.
So I suspend the sitting for 30 minutes?